I'm gonna share with you 9 Logic Pro tips that feel like cheating. These are quick, easy, and these are tips that I use every single day as a full-time music producer and artist. They make my life easier, more creative, and more efficient. Let's get started. Number 1, how often have you worked on a project where as you start adding more and more elements, the project starts getting bigger and bigger, things start slowing down, and when you actually record, you start getting latency? Well, you can say goodbye to recording latency by using low latency mode. I'm gonna show you how this works, and I'm also gonna show you 5 very important things to be aware of when using low latency mode, or else you will be scratching your head wondering what is happening. Turning on low latency mode is incredibly easy. All you do is all the way at the top, you go to record, and then low latency monitoring mode, check that out. You turn that thing on and then boom, instantly when you record, you're no longer gonna have the latency issues that you had before. Now, 5 very important things to be aware of when you turn this on, because it's just super frustrating. I actually don't love this, but these are important things to know. But before that, you need to know that low latency mode only turns on when you actually record enable or turn input monitoring on a track. So if we go down here and click this right here, which is the input monitoring button, or we click this button right here, which is record enable, that will actually turn low latency mode on. Now, the 5 things you need to be aware of. Number 1 is when you turn low latency mode on, you will notice over here in the left, you have this plugin grayed out with the kind of yellowy orange lettering there. That is because low latency mode is going to automatically disable plugins that use a lot of CPU. So for example, if I were to jump in here and grab Auto-Tune as an example, you're gonna see Auto-Tune does not work. Number 2 is when you're using low latency mode, whenever you record the actual parts that you're recording, you might notice that the monitoring almost feels weird, like almost like it's too early. And then what you might have to do is actually push the audio back a little bit in the case that you notice this is actually causing problems when you record. Whenever I turn low latency mode on, sometimes it causes me to rush a little bit more than I normally would. Just something to be aware of. Number 3, when you have low latency mode on, you cannot use sidechain compression. So if you have low latency mode on at all, at any point in time, and you have sidechain compression happening somewhere else, like you're kicking your bass or sidechain, it will automatically disable sidechain, period. Number 4, when you enable low latency mode, it will also disable the ability to use buses. So in other words, if over here, I actually had this specific instrument going to a bus, same thing, you'll notice that the buses are disabled. If you want to re-enable those, you simply turn off the monitoring, and look at that, we're back in business. And finally, number 5, whenever you enable low latency mode, it brings the actual track volume down a lot. So if you notice that, wow, I feel like when I'm singing into the microphone, it just got super quiet. That is part of what low latency mode does. I don't know why that is. It's very frustrating. So you might just need to grab the fader and push up whatever you're recording a fair bit. Be fair warned that when you turn low latency mode off, it will be super loud again. So make sure you bump it back down to where it was to begin with. Don't say I didn't tell you. Tip number 2, if you have a melody idea, but you don't actually play a keyboard instrument, or you can't plug the notes in via MIDI, and you still want to be able to get that melody into MIDI so you can start working with the idea, let me show you how by converting audio to MIDI. All right, so in order to turn audio into MIDI, there are a couple things that we need to do to begin with. But what we're gonna start with is this simple melody idea that I have for one of the songs that I produced. Now, this is an actual sung part in the song, but it's just a good example of showing how you can convert audio to MIDI. Let's listen to it real quick. Okay, so very simple little melodic idea. So in order to convert this audio into MIDI, the first thing we have to do is double click on the actual audio. That will open up our audio editing window, and we need to turn on flex pitch. So we're gonna go here and turn on flex. Now automatically it's gonna have flex time. You need to set this to flex pitch. And once we have flex pitch, you can now see we actually have these notes. All right, so once we have that, you're gonna go to edit, and all the way at the bottom, you can create MIDI track from flex data, click that, and then boom. Just like that, we now have MIDI information. You're welcome, enjoy. That brings us to tip number 3. Whenever I'm producing music, I want my music to sound human and authentic, even if I am actually using MIDI. But quantization is still a very important part of producing to fix some of these little discrepancies in minor rhythmic errors. So how can you still correct that without it sounding robotic? I'm actually gonna show you 2 methods, so this is kind of like a 2-for-1 tip. 1 is using Humanize, and 2 is actually adjusting the quantization percentage. Let's get into it. All right, so first things first, let's just go ahead and record something very simple. All right, so now that I've recorded that little part, we can zoom in here and we can see there are these little rhythmic discrepancies. You can see I'm a little bit early, so I'm rushing. This one's a little bit late. And so in a lot of cases, what people would do is they just do Command A and Q to quantize. And this is gonna quantize it to 100%. First off, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this, but if you start to feel like it sounds robotic or too perfect, then the first thing you can do is go down here into strength, and you can just change the strength of quantize. And you can see the MIDI notes just wobbling there. And so if you set this to 50%, that's going to be 50% quantized strength. Now we can go back and set it to 80% if you want to do that instead. Or what you can do is set it to 100%, then go up here to Functions, MIDI Transform, and Humanize. And it's gonna pull up this window right here, select and operate. You can adjust these settings, these parameters. Usually I don't touch it. Select and operate, and then it will automatically add a little bit of humanization into those MIDI performances. Boom. Tip number 4, have you ever had a vocal recording that looks like this, where one part of the phrase is super loud and the other part is super quiet? Well, this can be a bit of a problem when we want to compress and process the vocal, because the loud part is going to get compressed really heavily, whereas that quieter part won't get compressed as hard. And if you want a consistent and smooth compression across all of it, you're gonna run into some issues with that. So let me show you how you can fix that by using clip gain. So in a case like this, where we have this vocal here, which is a fair bit louder than these vocals here. By the way, this isn't terrible, but in a lot of cases, these are very dynamic, very, very wide. The really loud part is really loud and the really quiet part is really quiet. But in this case, what we can do is grab this section right here using the marquee tool. If you don't have the marquee tool, just go ahead and add it here, and you use Command, click, drag, and then click on that. It will automatically cut that out. So what we can do is change the actual gain of this audio region to fit the same size, or basically be the same amount of gain as this audio region. The way we do that is highlight the region, go up here to region, go to gain. You can see gain is right here. Click in this section anywhere, and then just drag. And you can see here, whoop, 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 whoop. We can now adjust and modify that. And we can now bring it down to what looks to be better. I usually just eyeball it personally. If you're like really concerned about it, you can go in and you know, be more detail oriented. But for the sake of what I'm doing, I never do that. I just eyeball it. I make it look very comparable. I'm looking at the peaks here. I make the peaks similar. This is gonna make it so that once the compressor hits on this moment, it's not hitting super hard, and when it hits on this moment, it's not hitting not as hard. So I can actually level it out a little bit easier. It just makes things sound better, so you don't have inconsistency on how much compression there is. Tip number 5, have you ever had multiple ideas for the exact same track, but you don't wanna record an idea and then delete the idea and then record another idea to then delete it to record another? Well, that's annoying. You shouldn't ever have to do that. I'm gonna show you exactly how you can be able to get multiple ideas out by using track alternatives. There's also other things you can do with track alternatives. I'll show you all the secret sauce. Let's do it. All right, so I've got this piano part here, right? Now let's say that I wanted to try out a bunch of different piano ideas, but I don't want to just delete the ideas to then try out more ideas. What instead we can do is go right click or control click on the actual track itself, go down to track header components and enable track alternatives. I always have track alternatives enabled because there are so many cool things you can do with track alternatives. And then what that's going to do is give us this little arrow down here. We can now create new track alternatives. We can duplicate track alternatives, and we can also rename these track alternatives. So let me show you a real world example. I've got this piano part, and let's say I want to try out some different piano ideas. All right, so I've got idea 1 here, but what if I want to try a completely different idea? Well, in Logic, if I were to record over this, it would just add or it would delete, right? It's kind of one or the other. So what you can do here is go to new track alternative, and then boom, just like that, it resets the track, and now I can record another idea. Just like that, another idea, boom. It's amazing, it's beautiful. But you might be like, what if I want to go back, and what if I liked idea 1 the most? Well, all you have to do is go back here to track alternative A. Look at that, it's amazing. Now, the other really useful part of this is vocals. Typically, when you record vocals, you're gonna have a take folder, like a big old folder of takes, right? And when I actually want to start editing my vocals, tuning my vocals, I wanna flatten that folder and just have the one vocal like we have right here. And I want a single track, but I don't want to delete the take folder. I would duplicate that take folder. Let's just do this real quick. Duplicate, and then I would come here, folder A, and I would rename this takes, and then B would be edits. And then I would oftentimes do a third one, duplicate again, and then this would be final. And then that way, if I ever need to get back to my takes folder, I can easily go back to my takes. I did use track alternatives on another couple tracks that we did live. So you can see here, we got the cajon and djembe right here. And you can see here that we do have track alternatives, A and B. And if I go back to A, look at what we have here. We have the original take folder. So now we have C, right? You're gonna wanna duplicate on both since this is a stereo track. Okay, great, we've got C. And then what I'm gonna do is come in here and flatten this. So now we have a flattened track here. What that does is actually deletes all of the other takes, but I can still easily get back to my takes folder right here. Let's say, for example, later on I realize, actually, I didn't really love that take that I used in that one section. And yeah, you don't wanna delete those takes, so instead you can still get back to it, but you're not dealing with, oh, I gotta duplicate this track and then mute the track and then hide the track so it's not in the way confusing me. It makes it so much easier. That's primarily how I use track alternatives. Tip number 6, have you ever recorded an instrument, a real instrument with a microphone, and you have small timing errors, where normally if you were using MIDI, you could easily quantize that, but when you're using real audio, it's a lot more difficult to actually get those timing issues fixed. I'm gonna show you exactly how to fix this using Logic Pro's Flex Time. Now, Flex Time is a little bit of a mixed bag, doesn't always work amazing, and if you don't use the right settings, you're gonna be really frustrated, so let me show you how to use it properly and what things to watch out for. So we're actually gonna take a look at the exact same track that we were just looking at, which is this cajon. Now, this cajon right here, we did record live. This is with a stereo microphone pair, and what we need to do now is actually edit this because the timing is not 100% perfect. If I turn the metronome on here, you can hear what I'm talking about. It's okay, but it is definitely not perfect. And so what we're gonna do is double click on the audio here. So we're gonna turn on Flex here. And when we open this up, you can see there's Flex Time for a lot of different options, right? You have monophonic, slicing, rhythmic, polyphonic, speed, all of this stuff, right? Now it's very important that you pick the correct option. These are different algorithms that are going to approach the audio in different ways. If we are using a cajon, let's put on our thinking caps for a second. Which one of these would you like to pick? Rhythmic, right? Because this is a rhythmic instrument. If this was a piano, for example, or a vocal, or any other instrument that has actual pitch, you're going to want to select polyphonic. Even if it is a single melody, I usually pick polyphonic, not monophonic. I usually pick polyphonic. It's the best algorithm, in my opinion, for anything that has pitch. It's gonna do a much better job of recognizing the differences in pitch. So we're gonna go ahead and pick rhythmic here. Now, what you'll notice is I click that and nothing happened. Well, that's because now what we need to do is take our trusty little keyboard here and hit Q. When you hit Q for quantize, look at that. All of a sudden we have quantization enabled and we can go back to the start of this and listen. Now what I'm gonna do is go to 16th notes on the grid. The way I get to this window, by the way, is going down to custom. This will make it so you can actually change the grid size. Okay, great. So listen now to how much better this sounds now that I've enabled quantization. Boom, all of a sudden it is absolutely spot on. Now what it's gonna do is add these little markers here, and we can click on these markers and drag and move around. And this is how we actually get things on the grid. If there is a mistake, which by the way, there inevitably will be, you might need to go in here and make some modifications and changes. Now, if you're using polyphonic mode on another track, like a piano or acoustic guitar, you're gonna really wanna take a look at the actual flex markers themselves. Sometimes it will put markers where there's not actually a note or transient happening. And if that happens, all you have to do is go right up here and click X. And as you can see, it will convert it back to what it was originally played. So if you have any weird artifacting or weird stuff happening, you can easily do that. The other thing you can do is if there is a transient that did not get marked, you can just click anywhere and then boom, look at that. We can now start dragging it around and it's going to manipulate it. I like to do this as little as humanly possible. The more you do, the more artifacts you're possibly gonna hear. So when it comes to polyphonic, in other words, you're using other instruments like a piano or acoustic guitar, really pay attention to how it actually sounds. You might notice some weird artifacting, and when you go in and you look, a lot of times it's because it put a transient marker somewhere that there's not actually a transient happening, and then it makes it sound very funky. Just keep an eye out for that. Tip number 7, one of the coolest features that Logic Pro added a little while back was the ability to create sampled instruments yourself instantly. It's so incredibly easy. I'm gonna show you how using the quick sampler. All right, so to demonstrate how to use the quick sampler, I'm gonna use this right here, which is a kalimba, right? This is a kalimba. Anyway, we're just gonna use this microphone, we're gonna use the kalimba, and we're gonna turn this into an instrument I can actually play on my MIDI controller, which is gonna be so sick. Let's do it. All right, so we got this on, check that out. Look, hi. Okay, so what we're gonna do is simply just record this. We're gonna let it hang on for a little while. Now, I do have my fan on up here, so you can hear that. So what we're gonna do is just play a single note. Yeah, a little bit of that hiss there is bothering me, but we're gonna go ahead and record this. Just a single note is all we need. Of course, you can hear other stuff going on in my house. It's kind of funny. All right, so now, that's so funny. You can literally hear, like, I think my kids are downstairs. We'll just go ahead and fade that out, right? Okay, cool. And then what we're gonna do, for the sake of cleaning this up, we're gonna go right to the very beginning, double click on there, and then we're gonna add a tiny little fade at the beginning. That way we have a nice clear transient going on. All we have to do is grab this, click and drag over here, and then we're going to do quick sampler optimized. Now check this out. Now I have my MIDI controller here. Pretty sick. So now just with a few plugins, some compression, EQ, smooth operator, and a little bit of reverb, check this out. Nice. Tip number 8, if you're like me, you're a pianist or you like kind of noodling around on your MIDI controller before you actually record some ideas, well, what happens if you play an idea that you really like, you think this is such a cool idea, and then the second you go to record it, you're like, I totally forgot what that was I just played a second ago. Don't worry, you can still get back to it as long as it's MIDI. You can't do this for audio using MIDI capture recording. And it's so easy. It's like Logic Pro is just always recording you all the time, which is actually a little bit concerning if you stop and think about it too long. Anyways, let me show you how. All right, I'm just gonna play out a random idea here. We're not even recording anything. I'm just gonna noodle around, right? Oh, that was really bad. I'm gonna play something I actually like. And then I'm like, oh, I want to record that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally can't remember anything I just played. All I have to do is Shift R. Look at that. Now it also recorded everything else I didn't like, but this is the part I actually like. Check this out. Isn't that incredible? It's amazing. And that's literally all there is. Just Shift R. It's kind of creepy, actually. Tip number 9, if you have produced with strings or pads, it's inevitable that you have wound up with parts that have these really long sustained MIDI notes. And if you start recording in the middle of that, then guess what? You're not gonna have any of those parts actually playing because you have to start all the way at the beginning where those notes actually start for them to play, which is super annoying. You can actually easily fix this by simply enabling MIDI chase. I'm gonna show you how. It's so fast, so easy. Let's do it. Chances are you've seen this where you have a pad or strings that look like this, right? Just hangs on to the same thing for like multiple bars, right? We're like hanging on to this for a long time. But what if you want to start playing right here? Well, nothing's gonna happen. We have to go all the way back to the beginning of when the note actually sounds to actually make it do anything, which is really dumb. All you have to do is go up to File, Project Settings, MIDI, and then check this out. You just go to Chase, look at that, Notes, check, boom. And then look at this. Now that we've got that, check this out. Heyo, and here we go. It's going to restart everything. Now, you can get some funky little results with this, just as a little heads up, but it works like a gem. You're welcome. Now, if you ever wanted to see a real music producer working on music that's actually getting released into the universe, to see how they work on music from start to finish, I actually filmed an entire production from literally the very beginning, the idea, all the way to final release. You can watch that video right here. I'll see you there. Love you, bye.